Hi, welcome to Overthinking Entrepreneur. I'm Megan, and I've had a successful online business for a few years now, and I think I overthought probably about 90% of my decisions along the way. Honestly, I just overthought whether I should say 90% or pretty much every decision in this intro. So if you find that relatable, you are definitely in the right place. In this podcast, I will help you get out of overthinking and into action so that your online business can finally start growing. Are long posts bad? Should you be working on making your posts shorter if you tend to be kind of wordy and lengthy and write longer posts? This is one of the questions I get asked most frequently, and I thought it would be a really good topic for a podcast episode. And that way I'll have it here. You guys can hear all my thoughts on it. And then when I inevitably get this question a lot more times in the future, I'll also have this here to point people to. And I don't mean that in like a snarky way. It's not a bad question. It's a perfectly valid question. And honestly, it's a concern I did have in the beginning because I'm wordy. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you've probably noticed that sometimes I dance around a topic and maybe over-explain a little more than I need to. So I am not the most succinct person in the world by any means. I can be rambly. I get sidetracked. Some of my posts are really long. It always makes me laugh when people say, my post is so long. Is this too long? What do I need to do? And I go look at it and I'm like, oh, I wouldn't even consider that a long post. I wouldn't even consider that bordering on a long post for me. So we're all just kind of different when it comes to what we consider a long post. But I get this question all the time. And I thought that it would be a really good one for me to talk about. And it's one that I kind of have a few different answers for, depending on your stage of business. But it's also one that I kind of have the short answer to and then the more in-depth answer to. So let's start with the stages of business. If you are brand new to growing your audience and you're pretty brand new to creating content and you're not very good at it yet, I do think shorter can be better. It's not that short content is good and long content is bad. It's simply that you're still working on your skills for now, and watching a long, rambly, awkward video from someone who's really nervous and uncomfortable on camera is really long and really painful. And we've all been there. I am not saying don't do videos. I am not saying second guess yourself. I'm not saying anything like that at all. The only way you're going to get better at them is by doing them. So do them, do as many as you can. Do the crap out of your videos until you get better at them, because you'll get better. But in the beginning, like I said, if we're talking about something like a video and you're pretty awkward on camera and it might feel a little bit uncomfortable for people to watch while you're still building that confidence, I would try and go shorter rather than longer. Also, if you click on someone's video and you go to watch it and, depending on if there's someone that you know and you trust and you always like their content and they always have something really great to say, and you see the video is 45 minutes long, you'll probably watch it, or you'll at least set it aside to watch it when you have more time. But if it's a brand new person and they haven't earned that trust from you yet, and you're not even sure if you'll like them or not, and the video's 45 minutes long, you're way less likely to click on it, in my opinion and in my experience. So I think that while you're really focused early on audience growth, if you don't have those people yet, you don't have your raving fans that engage on everything that you do, and you're really struggling and trying to just even find your people to watch and read your long posts, I would try and focus on keeping them a little bit shorter. But as you become more established and as you find your people, then I don't think you should really think too hard about the length of your posts at all. I think instead what you want to focus on is, what is the subject matter? What am I trying to communicate here? And how long of a post do I need to do that? Now, I do think there's a line where sometimes something should be broken up into multiple posts. If it's one story, but it's really long, break that up. You can do a part 1 and a part 2, part 3, part 4, however many you need, right? I think there is kind of a line where if someone's going to have to take forever to read your post, they're probably not going to. But more importantly than that, they're not going to remember everything that you said. I think that's the most important thing that you want to focus on is, how can I have a focused piece of content with one main takeaway, up to like 3 if you really need to, but beyond that, people are not going to remember it. So let's say that you want to talk about your best tips for a new gardener who's just getting started, and you have like 40 of these things. Awesome. But you don't want to do one piece of content with the list of 40. That's way too much. Instead, you want to give like your 1 or 2 tips, 1 tip daily, or 3 tips at a time. You want to break it down into something that feels manageable for people in terms of the content and what you're hoping they will get out of what they're watching, reading, listening to, whatever it is. So I think that's where you want to be mindful is, am I trying to put too many subjects into one piece of content? But as long as you are pretty focused in terms of the subject matter, then the post takes as long as it takes. My focus is always on, how do I tell them what they need to know? How do I educate them or give them that light bulb moment or make them feel understood and not alone, or, whatever that may be. It takes as long as it takes. And I think that if we get hung up on the length, then you are either padding things out to try and reach a certain length, or you're cutting out important things that they need to know to try and stay under a certain length. And at that point, it becomes more of a disservice to your audience because you're so fixated on the length of the content and not just serving through your content. And that's what I think the most important thing is. So my videos are 10 minutes long. Some are 45 minutes long. It just depends on what I'm talking about. I'm not going to get hung up on the length. I'm going to deliver what I need to deliver, say what I want to say. And if that's short, awesome. And if that's long, awesome. And then you'll decide if that's for you or not. And I think that's one of the most important things where I think people get hung up on this a lot is that they don't have that audience in the beginning. They're not really seeing the engagement. And so they get worried that it's the length. But I think it has a lot more to do with having the right people on your list and what it is that you're talking about, making sure that it's relevant to them, that they even care, that it's interesting to them. There is a quote I tried to look up who said this before I started recording. I got like multiple different answers of who originally said it. And one of them was Alex Hormozy. And I was like, okay, he's pretty new. I doubt he's the originator. So I'm just like, okay, I'm just not going to cite anyone because I'm not quite sure who said this. But no such thing as too long, only too boring. I wholeheartedly agree with that. There are people where I will read an incredibly long post, but I'm engaged. And there are people where I will barely read 2 sentences and I'm not interested. It has a lot more to do with that personal connection and your brand. Are you finding the right people who match the brand and the type of things that you want to put out there? Because yes, there are some people that will not read long posts, but they're probably not your people if you're someone that loves to write long posts. I think we're once again stuck in that feeling of I need to make everyone else happy and I need to try and change myself so that people will like what I'm doing or try and, guess what they might want. Or I think they're not watching because it's too long. Let's do this. Let's do that. And it's like, yeah, most of the time that's not really what's going on. Now, like I said in the beginning, I think you're better off to start a little shorter just while you're still doing audience growth. But beyond that, it should fit you and your brand more than anything else. I will say there's one exception where I've heard some people say, I hate reading long posts, but I write them all the time. I don't think you should expect your audience to do something that you're not willing to do. I write a lot of long posts, but I also read a lot of long posts. I'm happy to read long posts from people as long as it's keeping my attention. So that is one thing where it just, for me, that's like an integrity thing that I think is important, is to make sure that I'm not asking other people to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do. But the way that you communicate is the way that you communicate. And that's what's really going to make your brand feel solid and honest and authentic and magnetic to people, is when it feels like it's the real you and not like you're trying to be something you're not. So if you have in your head that long posts are bad and so you're trying not to do them, but then your posts aren't turning out very well because you can't fully express yourself because you can't talk as much as you want to talk, that's not going to serve your people. So anyway, you want it to really fit into your brand. And if that is wordy, awesome. And I think if it's wordy, just be wordy and just be you and be you everywhere. I am wordy in this podcast. I am wordy if you speak to me. I am wordy if you get a voice message from me. I am wordy in my written posts, in my emails. It's all the same. It all matches. And so, because it's all me, it's not me trying to do something or be something that I'm not. I'm just being myself. And so do some people not like my posts because they think they're too long? Probably. But they're simply not my people. I also have people who skim, who kind of read the beginning and maybe the end and they get the gist, and that's fine. I have people who read my shorter stuff but not my longer stuff. I have people who like my long videos but not my long posts. It's fine. There's everything in between. But I'm not going to try and change who I am to try and please other people. I'm just going to be me and let the people who like me for me find me, and that's amazing. And that's really what it comes down to. So you want it to just kind of fit you and your brand and whatever that looks like. And for me, like with my brand, it's very casual, it's very relaxed, it's very friendly and personal. So I'm not going to do these super edited videos that cut out just the quotes, because that just doesn't fit with me and my vibe and my brand. But if it does with you, and that could be a way that you shorten things. There's so many ways to go about this. I write very conversationally. I write the way that I speak, and I'm like that wherever you talk to me for the most part. And so that really just helps everything feel cohesive, which I think is really important. And then the other thing you want to think about is to make sure that the content that you're putting out there, the free stuff, matches up with the paid stuff you're trying to sell people. Now, depending on what your business is, this may or may not be as relevant for you. If you sell a physical product, this might not matter as much. But for example, if I've had some people suggest to me like, oh, maybe you should do some stuff that isn't videos for people that don't like videos. And I hear you. And I do some written things. It's not that I don't at all. But the flaw in that suggestion is that my paid stuff is mostly video based. So if you don't like videos, you're not going to like my paid stuff. And if you're not going to like my paid stuff, I'm not going to change what I'm doing to try and make you happy. It's not, I don't mean for that to sound like, well, screw you if you're not going to buy from me. Like, that's not how it's not that. It's not like aggressive or combative, but it's just, if you are never going to buy from my business, I'm not going to change anything about my business to try and make you happy because you're just not going to buy from my business. I want to focus on my people, on my actual customers, the people who are going to buy from me. So make sure that it lines up. So if you create workshops or courses or anything like I do, and a lot of it is video based, you want to make sure you're doing videos in your marketing, building an audience of people that likes videos. Because if you build an audience of people based on these short little text posts because you think that's what they like, and then you say, come sign up for my 2-hour long video workshop, and they say, oh, I don't like watching videos, I'm not going to do that. That's not going to get you anywhere, So you want to make sure that your free content lines up with what's relevant for paid. If that works for your business. Depending on what you sell, that may or may not be as relevant for you, but it's just important, even with your communication style, with the way that you like to talk to people. Just things like that, they're important. So you just want to, you just really want to think through, like, is this going to impact what it's like if they want to go on to work with me in a paid sense? Like, if, for example, I've been doing a lot of my coaching lately through voice messages. Now, I still will do calls with people. It's not that it's exclusively voice message, but I've been doing a lot more things with voice messages. And if people don't like voice messages, they're not going to buy that coaching from me, So if I'm putting out more audio and I'm communicating in voice messages, that's going to help find the right people that are the right fit for the work that I'm trying to do. So that's what you really want to keep in mind. It should fit you and your brand, and it should line up with your paid offers if that's relevant for you. I think the only time it's bad and that you should shorten your posts, for the most part, I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to say stay true to yourself, say what you need to say, communicate the whole thing. Don't add any fluff, but don't cut out any important stuff either. And so some of your posts will be short and some will be long, and that's fine. I mean, even if you look at the length of my podcast episodes, they're kind of all across the board. And ironically, this episode where I'm talking to you about how you don't need to shorten your stuff is probably going to be one of the shortest episodes I've ever done. But that's because that's how long it's going to take me to say what I have to say, and that's that. And I'm not going to waste your time trying to make it longer. So anyway, here's my list of reasons why I think you should, like why it could be bad and why you might want to intentionally shorten your content. If you're only doing it because you think you're supposed to. So if you're only writing long stuff because you see someone like me doing that and succeeding and you think, okay, I guess that's what works, so I'm going to make myself do this even though I hate it. If you don't like writing long stuff, or if you don't like doing long videos but you think you're supposed to because you see other people doing it that way, take that off your shoulders. You don't need to do that. You can just be yourself. And so if it's short and sweet, awesome. Be short and sweet. Don't do it because you think you're supposed to be doing it. The next reason I think it's bad and you should stop is if you're padding with fluff. So I think we've all seen this, right? People, they do this for various reasons. They do it for engagement. They do it for views. They do it to try and waste time. They do it for their own ego. I don't even know. But we've all been on a 40-minute long video that had 10 minutes of actual content. And the rest was them just, wasting time or stalling or building hype for this game-changing thing they're about to tell you, but then it's really just not that big of a deal or not that game-changing, or they are, I don't even know. I've seen tons of this, right? But I think we've all probably seen it where we watch something, listen to something, read something, and we think, I feel like most of that was a waste of my time. It's like the content version of this meeting could have been an email, right? Like, this did not need to be a video, or this didn't need to be a 40-minute video. This should have been a 5-minute video. Do not ramble and waste people's time. They will stop coming back for more. I will give you a couple tries because every now and then things happen, right? I'm sure I've gotten sidetracked in a couple of videos or just been chatty in a way that I didn't mean to, and it could have felt like time wasting to someone, even though that wasn't my intention and that's not my normal. I understand things happen, so I will give someone a few tries. But if you consistently waste my time, if I watch a few of your things, listen to a few of your podcast episodes, read a few of your videos, whatever, and consistently I'm finding that you're padding it out with a bunch of stuff just to like fill in time for whatever reason, but it wasted my time, then I'm done. So I think you really want to be mindful and not pad things out with fluff. You also just want to do just some proofreading. Like I always go back and reread my posts and ask myself, does this flow? Does this make sense? Did I change directions 10 times? Like sometimes a post, it's not so much that what you want to say is too long, but it's too much for one post. So that's something you want to keep in mind, is that sometimes it could be, it's not that it's bad, it's just that it should be separated into multiple posts instead of just all one long post that no one's really going to remember. And I think that's part of what you want to keep in mind, is that it's not necessarily that the length can be the problem. Sometimes it can be. There are some people that flat out just, if they see that a post looks really long, they're just not going to read it. Although I do think you want to just be visually mindful of like spacing and skipping some blank lines and things so that it's not this like intimidating, scary wall of text when they're reading it. But some people, it's the length is the deal breaker, and that's that. And there's not much you can do about that. But for most people, it's more about, can they even remember what they read? If it's way too long, can they remember what they heard you say? People only retain so much from one video. And so if you're wanting to teach people something and you have a list of a ton of items, putting all of those into one piece of content, it might seem great, but the problem is now it's super long, which isn't bad in and of itself, but it's super crammed full of information and no one can remember any of it. They walk away going, yeah, I remember that was a good video, but I don't remember any of the tips. So many times it's better, or like, let's say you're telling a really long story, you could do part 1 and then part 2 and then part 3. Like sometimes I'll go back, and if I find a post is getting really long, and especially if I'm struggling to like tie it together, or I'm struggling with the flow, many times I'll take a step back and read it and say, oh, this is actually like 2 different ideas. These should be 2 separate posts instead of trying to put them all together. So sometimes you're just combining something that should be separated into multiple posts. That can be something that you want to just be mindful of, and that will come with time and practice. You'll get better at identifying when that's happening. Another reason why it could be bad is if you're just rambling with non-relevant information. And I understand, I can ramble too. I try to be mindful of not doing this, but it happens. But you just want to go back and reread your post, or try and catch yourself if you're doing videos and say, okay, am I just rambling about something that no one really knows or cares about? Because if you're just rambling and the information isn't relevant to people, then that is kind of a bad thing, and people will stop reading. And it's not because it was long, it's because it was rambling and it wasn't relevant. You lost their attention. So you really want to be mindful. Again, the length in and of itself isn't the problem, but how interesting can it stay throughout that entire length, I think is more important. And then the other reason you want to just keep in mind is if your ideal client that you have chosen and who you're trying to market to is a super busy person, you don't want to do a 45-minute video every day and then say, why aren't my people watching? I'm so frustrated. They don't have time. They're busy. You chose them because they're busy. So you just want to be mindful of what's realistic for your people. What can they do? And I think that's the other thing. Like a long post once or twice a week versus a long post 3 times a day is very different. You know, we have to look at the overall, what are we expecting from people? What are we asking of them? Because when we create a piece of content, we're asking them to read it or watch it, engage with it in some way, right? So you always just want to be mindful of, am I putting way too much on my people? Am I doing a long post here and then a long video in my group and then also this and then also this challenge and then saying, oh my gosh, no one's doing my stuff. Like they're overwhelmed. It's way too much. They can't keep up with it, especially if you've intentionally chosen a very busy person. So you just want to be mindful of, what kind of time do your people have available, and what are you really asking them to do with all of the various pieces of content that you're putting out? But those are really the only times where I think you need to intentionally work on shortening your posts. If you're only doing because you think you're supposed to, you're padding and wasting their time with lots of fluff, you are combining way too many ideas into one piece of content when really it should be multiple, you're rambling and it's just got a lot of non-relevant information, or if you're targeting an ideal client who's super busy and then spamming them with hours and hours of content that they can never keep up with. But other than that, I think you should just be you and just focus on delivering the best piece of content that you can, whether that's short, whether that's long, whether that's in the middle. You'll have all of them. Depending on the subject matter, sometimes it'll be shorter and sometimes it'll be longer. And that's how it should be. If you find your videos are always the same length, or your podcast episodes are always the same length, or your written posts, like if they're always the same length, I feel like there's something going on there where you're focused more on the length than giving the subject matter what it needs, because some topics are bigger than others. They just are. And sometimes they need more words and sometimes they need less. So, okay, there's my thoughts. I'm so curious. Do you agree or disagree? And you don't have to agree with me. This is just my thoughts because people ask me this question all the time. So here it is. Now I have it recorded for you to hear. So I would love to know if you agree or if you disagree. And I would also love to know if you are a wordy long post kind of person or not so much. hope this episode inspires you to go take action on something you have been overthinking. As much as I wish you could, you cannot think your way to success, so promise me you're going to go take some action today. Head over to overthinkingentrepreneur.com to find all the cool stuff I've made for you over the years, like my free guide to getting more social media engagement and my Facebook group, Dynamite Entrepreneurs, which has a free course on social media basics.